My name is Uguchi Aguda. I'm the CEO of PenUp, and you're welcome to this webinar that is handled by PenUp in conjunction with one of our partners, Conrad Clark and Associates. I will assume everyone is logging in from home or remotely. That's the new normal that we find ourselves in. And this comes with some risks, as we know. So within this period, cyber attacks, online frauds, online attacks have increased tremendously because, of course, everyone is working remotely. And for instance, in Nigeria, in the month of March, I think we achieved the highest ever online transactions ever in the history of the nation. And that comes with its own risks because fraudsters are also looking to get a piece of that pie. So with COVID and most companies moving to remote working, there's going to be increased risks. And that's not going to end after the lockdown. It's going to continue. So we felt we should equip our people and get them to understand this risk and how they can manage it. So PenUp in conjunction with Conrad Clark is having this series for operators. I would assume that it's just pension operators that are here. But for those that do not know, let me just introduce PenUp. So PenUp is the umbrella association of the pension fund operators of Nigeria. And essentially what we do is try to foster a relationship between the pension operators and trying to ensure that their interests are protected. That's really essentially what we do, coming up with trainings, forums, investment options for the pension operators. I'll just start with some ground rules. So please mute your devices. I think that has been done already, so all your devices will be on mute. If you want to ask a question, you can either raise up your hand or put it in the chat box, but there will be time for those questions to be answered after the training. So it's going to be about 30 to 45 minutes long training, and then we'll have room for questions thereafter. So if you've got questions, just put them down or note them. At the end, you have the opportunity to ask questions yourself. So this training is being handled by Conrad Clark. I'll just hand over to the managing partner of Conrad Clark, Mr. Joachim Adenusi. He's been joined with some of his associates, Emma Kundif from UK and Patrick Misford, the Malta associate. I'll allow him to introduce them and let's just go straight into their session. Over to you, Joachim.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Absolutely, I agree that we're living in a very, very unprecedented times. Quite interesting that March was the highest, we broke the record of highest online transfer transaction in Nigeria. And this is just the beginning. And I think we're going to do more of that. I won't take your time because we have a lot to cover. I'm just going to try and lay kind of introduction background to the topic we are looking at. But most importantly, also to find out that within this period, there's been lots of misconception and understanding. Risk perception actually has escalated the problem with online fraud and all kind of things, the way people perceive risk. So my colleague, Emma, who most of you come to know more, we've been working together for quite a number of time, a long time now. She'll be exploring the issue of data security, and then another colleague of mine, Patrick, will be looking at cybersecurity generally within this period. So we'll keep it short and straight. I think just briefly about Conrad Clark, most of you must have heard about us, or maybe you're not familiar. We're responsible for all kind of initiatives, and we've been in Lagos for over 10 years now, approximately going 11 years. And we have different platforms like the education, clinical, Moremi, energy. It's interesting that we're in crisis with the energy, because just last year, October, we ran a section with all the oil and gas professionals, MDs and executives, exploring sustainability risk and looking at how do we handle a potential crisis from the oil. And here we are here again, and with the same problem, with the lowest oil price ever, and the implication for countries like ours in Nigeria, which would depend solely on oil. So we exist to assure performance outcomes when things are, and that's what we start most of our webinars. And we start with appreciations and thanks to our leaders and our people leading the nation, the fight against COVID-19, especially to His Excellency Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu and the Federal Ministry of Health for all they're doing, sacrifice, courage, and leadership. It's easier to complain that they're not doing enough. And it's easier for us to crucify them, but they're doing something, and we have to encourage them. And with thanks and encourage them to keep going. And we hope that with the support and all the scientific advices, we'll get out of this successfully. Now, what's the objective for today, really? Protection and survival of businesses during and after COVID-19. That's part of the skills transfer we're trying to bring to our partners and our friends and everyone joining. That's what's at the back of our mind. How can we protect and how can we ensure survival of our businesses and organizations? Most of you must have heard this about the social distancing. It's quite difficult, and we have been different webinars talking about the difficulties of ensuring social distance in Nigeria. And it's true, because there are other social issues that have been existent before COVID-19 that will be affecting the principle of social distancing, practicing it. Largely also poverty, the way we structure our properties, the way people live together. So, but the ideal is the fact that we want to reduce the number of daily cases and also reduce the number of deaths. And globally, it's obvious that it's not just COVID-19 that is causing the problem, but the pressure on the healthcare system itself. And with other underlying health issues, if we have more people complaining of COVID-19, then the other underlying health issues will be affected. So the consequential implications of rising the spread is actually what's causing more trouble. Yes, the spread is high, but the rate of death is very low. But the implications of the number of people under pressure, and that's why most people are talking about flatten the curve. Let me just also go back to most of us. Last year, Q3 and 4, we had lots of assumptions, business plan, budgets, marketing strategies, people strategy, and all those kind of things. And today, I believe that most of us will be looking at our business plans again, trying to look at stress testing some of those assumptions, financial assumptions, expense funding, marketing strategies we have to change. And we don't know how long the global delay or global impact will go for, but the assumption is that at the moment we need to start looking at everything we're doing and then challenge everything else, because the numbers we put forward to our board of directors last year to approve for this year, perhaps some will super exceed it, but a lot of people will not meet it. And the earlier we start looking at those assumptions, the better for us. Now, World Health Organizations actually, from the place of managing this COVID-19 crisis, they look at 8 major pillars. And there are so many of them, which you can see on my screen, but I'm not going to go too deep in them. I just want to focus on one area: risk communication and community engagement. Now, why am I looking at risk communication? In the last few weeks, there's been all kinds of things going on: conspiracy theories, perception, WhatsApp messages, email messages, all kinds of things. So in this particular risk communication, this is where also there are all kinds of threats to the organization, and those who have wicked or evil intentions, fraudulent intentions, will use this also place to as a way of fraudulently misleading people. And that's the dimension perhaps I'm bringing in this afternoon. The biggest issues about risk perception. Now, there are all kinds of assumptions going on there at the moment. Oh, how long is it going to go for? It's not effective. And some of us, if you drink certain types of medicine, you'll be okay. Africa is immune because it's a hot region. I'm sure all kind of myth going around the place. But the truth is, 90% of what's flying around is just based on perception, not reality. And the saddest thing, in fact, a lot of people make decisions at the back of perception, at the back of assumptions, at the back of what's not real. There are no empirical evidences, facts, or scientific evidences to prove or confirm some of these assumptions. There's nothing wrong with assumptions, but there's problem if we're unable to validate. If we base all our decision on the back of assumptions, then will be a problem. And for us as execs, the number one thing which I want us to begin to explore is the fact that not everything out there at the moment is true. And we have to start looking for ways to challenge stereotypical assumptions or things that are going on. And these are some of the things that will affect the way we can challenge assumptions and the way we can make decisions. One, if we can understand the anticipated consequence of what's going on, it might help us actually to check the perception of that risk. Past experience, COVID-19, nobody's got it before. So it's difficult to actually make a lot of assumptions at the back of this because, yes, we could look at Spanish flu happen, but it's different. And the global impact, not like the Spanish flu. How confident with the information we're having, the skills, the knowledge, the training. Part of what will affect the way our business, whether we'll survive or succeed, is actually our corporate culture, our norms, personal factors, the way we view things personally, the cost to address the implications of ignoring, and also the reward of actually proactively engaging with these things now. So in a nutshell, in addition to all the types of risks people are talking about, one of the biggest risks, one of the biggest threats at the moment is actually having a wrong perception or a wrong view of this particular crisis where we are. And there's a quote I love, say, every great person must pass and push through the gates of mediocrity. You find out that when you have millions and lots of people who are being guided by just mediocritical assumptions and suggestions, then the business also will be affected. And looking at our data and our security, our internet, and the cyber risk, there are three factors that tend to affect people's perception. Say subconscious factor, the things that have been put into us that are there, but that we're not actually aware of that are there. I'm not going to go into detail of this. A conscious factor, which I recommend a lot because that's based on facts and figure, data and analysis and feedback and evidences to be able to make a decision. Then there's affective factors. That is the way I feel. I'm not sure. I'm not feeling this thing. So that has to do with the way we feel. People have said that love at first sight is affective factors. You see somebody, they look pretty, and you say, oh, I'm going to marry you. That's it, love at first sight. But what will confirm the love at first sight is either the conscious factors. By the time you start hanging out with the person, you start seeing some other things, you now find out whether the reality of how you're feeling matches the outward impact of what you're saying, and you want to stay continued. So all these factors will affect us. Now, effective response during this period, before I hand over to Emma, Harvard Business Review launched this process flow a few years ago, that if we perceive an emerging threat or an emerging problem, how do we know that we can handle it effectively? And that's where we're going to have this conversation this afternoon. 1, recognition. 2, prioritization. 3, mobilization. Those 3 words are key. Can we recognize that there is a problem? Because sometimes people don't recognize there's a problem. And if we can recognize it, that's the first step, that at least I recognize that there's a problem or there's a challenge, something is going to happen. Number 2, if I recognize that there's a challenge or something is going to happen, is it important to me? Is it important to us, to our organization? Are we going to take it serious? So And the second bit is where you find procrastinations, assumptions, delay. Yeah, it's important, but nothing will happen. You know, our attitude, our behavior. And there, it's possible that some people might not say, well, we recognize this is serious, but we'll handle it later. And the third one is actually mobilization. What are we going to do about it? So if we know it's important and we acknowledge that, we recognize it, who is going to do it when? How quick are we going to respond to it? These three factors combined together will help us to see those who are effective for ineffective people. One of the things I've been saying is that crisis will expose either your brilliance or your incompetencies. One of those things will happen during crisis, during emergency. And in this period, this season, it will expose more incompetencies or brilliance. But the question will be, the failure to do nothing, will it be because we couldn't predict or recognize this thing? We didn't deem it fit as important, or we failed to mobilize resources? And I'll leave those three questions. Those are the kind of opening statement I'm going to give, and I'll hand over to Emma, who is the Director of Skill of Risk in the UK and also one of our partners to set off from data protection during COVID-19. Thank you, Emma.
An interest in the risks associated with people and the accurate description of risk, and that is my absolute passion. This is a very short session on what is a very large topic, and most of my work in life has been about protecting people from physical and mental harm. But in recent years, this has developed into protecting the financial and reputation harm to people. It is an interesting subject, and it makes me a bit of a data warrior when dealing with organisations who want to collect my own personal data. But it also makes me very aware of organisations who don't make every effort to ensure that my data is secure. And it makes me judge in a positive or negative light that organisation. And that isn't going to change during this crisis. If your organisation has a data breach, there will be no sympathy from your customers or from your suppliers or from anyone else. So it's important that you do consider the protection of data during this time. So the aims of my session, I'm going to cover what data protection means, and in particular, how data is handled in uncertain times like these. I'm going to just briefly cover the 6 principles of GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. These are the European regulations on data protection, which in my view, quite morally, they should be applied to anyone's data, whether they're European or not. Now, finally, I'd like to briefly cover how data can be lost, and in particular, the increased risk of data theft or loss from employees who might be working at home. On a personal level, if you take anything away from this session, you should be careful with your own information and that of your family, particularly that of your children, and to whom they give that information to. Next slide, please. The top 3 data breaches of 2018, and the aim of this is to put things into context, and this shows the top 3. And the number 1 top data breach in 2018 was in India, Aadhaar, and it affected 1 billion Indian residents. This was a database, and it was the world's largest biometric database, containing ID numbers, bank account numbers, and other sensitive information, including fingerprints from Indian nationals. Administrator rights were sold to anyone who wanted them for $8 a time, allowing the users to look up information on any person they wished. The next one, the second, was Marriott Starwood, the hotel chain, which had an unauthorised access to 327 million guest details, which included passport numbers and contact details. A subsequent investigation uncovered that the unauthorised access had dated back to 2014. And the third one was in the US, Exactis, Florida, a marketing company that had 340 million US citizens' records on a publicly available server. Information included names, addresses, and email. And of course, if a data breach can happen to a very large organisation, it can happen to yours. And the risk has increased. There are more weak points in the system, with many more people working at home. So let's look at three definitions. Firstly, data protection, the process of safeguarding important information. So the importance of protection increases as the amount of data created and stores continues to grow at an unprecedented rate. We could look at corruptions. People having access to data might change some of that data to benefit others. Others may look to compromise the information, and that means that by accessing the information, they get some interesting information about some individuals that might benefit them being made public, and then of course cause reputational or financial damage to those individuals. And it could look also as loss, which I will cover later on in this session. Handling information is the process by which personal information is used. It doesn't mean just when you use it, it means when and where it is stored. It also means even when you're disposing of it. It is the process from when you first collect to when you eventually dispose of it. And at times like these, you still need to be sure that the job is being done properly and that individuals, while still handling the information when working at home, are doing it in a secure way. Confidentiality. This information you're handling is confidential, and you should really think about who really needs to see it. Not everyone in your organisation needs to see it, but you also need to stress to employees that people at home, who they live with, should not be having access to the information that may be on their laptop computer. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of the 6 principles of the General Data Protection Regulations. And I think they're very good principles. Number 1 is fair, lawful, and transparent. This is being very fair about the information you collect and using the personal data that you have fairly and lawfully. It's explicitly telling people how you will be using their data and what it will be used for and whom you can share it with. This can be verbally in writing on a website, but it must be very clear. You cannot hide how the information, how you use their data. And it also has to be used in a lawful way. And in terms of pensions, you are collecting an awful lot of information to enable you to make estimates on the pensions that people might get. Point number 2, principle number 2, data minimization. Only collect the information what you need, not to collect information because it might be useful at some point. You may have all experienced when you go shopping online that they ask you for your date of birth. They don't need that to complete the transaction. They actually want it for marketing purposes. And I myself, being a data warrior, do actually object to them asking that question. Number 3 is storage limitation. Not to keep the information you have indefinitely and deciding when a client is not a client anymore. You've also now got to think about where data is being stored. Again, we look at employees working at home. Data might have been moved onto desktops of home workers. So there you now have data being stored in another location. In terms of data retention, how long will you have to keep that data for? And when it comes to hard copy, you must ensure that it's being destroyed, not to just hand over to the destruction agent. You need to make sure that it has been done and has been properly carried out. Number 4 is limited purpose. You can only use that data that you've collected for your own business purposes. You can't take that database and use it for other means, and using it for matters outside the scope of your business. Number 5 is thinking about accuracy, making sure you need to keep that data up correct and up to date. And then finally, principle 6, integrity and confidentiality. You should secure your data, so that's encrypted emails, and of course with people working at home and communicating by email, by Zoom meetings, there is many more chances of emails and meetings being intercepted and data stolen as you talk or as you pass data on. It might be that computers are left logged on and other people have access to the information. We need to be thinking about what printing are employees doing in the home that might have confidential information. You need to be thinking about how are you managing this at this time, and what have you told your employees about data security. So if we move on to the next slide. How can data be lost or misused? Well, the risk has gone up here. It may be that you've still got hard copy information out there. That could be easily stolen or seen by others. Home working is going to be a risk. Data is being taken out of the organisation. It may be possible that people in working at home thought, I'll just print this off so I can work at hard copy at home, and now you have another copy of the information. There is going to be the possibility of people who live with you having access to information that they shouldn't have. It may be from the paper that's lying around, or it may be a member of your family that now needs to use your laptop in the evening because they want to do something else. There could be human errors with laptops and security left on public transport or stolen from vehicles. The increased risk is there again because employees are taking information out of the office. If the individual isn't too good with their security, they may just think it's okay to leave a laptop in a car if they just rush into the shops to get a few things. Are they really beginning to think about the possibilities? Can they really see the risk event of, in those 2 or 3 minutes while they're in the shop, someone coming in, gaining access to their car and stealing that laptop? They might be information on unencrypted USBs. Employees may feel that it's okay to take information home on a USB, but what if that is lost or stolen? What sometime later on in the future, someone else uses that USB only to find all of that previously downloaded information? How much track is your organisation keeping on the use of USBs if you allow it at all? Then we could look at the information stolen in a hacking event, which I shall leave Patrick to talk more about later. That an employee that might not be so aware of some of the cyber events, and it's going to be the main area of risk there is the asset between the chair and the keyboard. The lack of understanding of the employee in perhaps opening up an email that might look genuinely from their organisation only to open something and let some kind of malware onto their system. And then, of course, there's the interception on public or a less secure Wi-Fi. Employees working at home may not have all the security measures set up on their own Wi-Fi, and it's quite easy for others nearby to pick up on information leaving the system and being emailed out. And so it's perhaps thinking about what security features your employees have on their own Wi-Fi systems. Next slide, please. So how can data be misused as well? it could be quite easily given away through an email or the phone. So in this time, if people are emailing more, there could be accidental disclosure, an email sent to the wrong address or the wrong person, emails disclosed to a whole group, the individual not understanding to use the blind copy option on emails. A company could use the information for purposes that are outside the scope of its business, completely unrelated. Or if a member of staff steals the database to sell on to someone for profit. And the final one is that a member of staff leaves, having downloaded all the information they have on their laptop computer, and they now have it for their own benefit, and they take your customer details with them and use it for their own benefit. Taking away is theft, and the employee has no right to it. So it is important to stress, even at this time, that on exit interviews, that data must remain in the company and cannot be taken away. Within the European Union itself, employees who've actually done this have faced legal action and have been subsequently convicted of theft. Next slide, please. I shall leave you with this slide, and this is the privacy compliance framework, and it leads naturally into Patrick's session. And Joachim talked earlier about the perception of risk, and he's quite right, and that's where I start with people. And you can see in that staff training is vitally important. Data protection, I know, is not the most interesting of subjects, although I find it interesting, but it is important that you must stress to your staff, particularly for home workers, the importance of data protections and the controls you have in place. You will need competent advice in IT, and advice that is able to communicate effectively with senior management. Your good technology cannot be deployed without competent staff, and you need effective processes and an overall IT technology plan. And then finally, you need good management and governance and best practice and regular IT audits to make sure that your files, your systems in place are indeed secure. Training should be part of in-company training, and at the very beginning needs to be included in induction. When people leave, they need to be reminded that information remains confidential and they're not permitted to take it with them. And the final point I'm going to make is it's important that you think about and do and conduct investigations into all IT incidents, no matter how small. The investigation levels will vary, but it's important for your organisations to get people to report when there's been a data incident, but to have a level of IT investigation of those incidents. So I'm going to leave it there. That was a very brief introduction or run through data protection. I will take questions at the end, but now I shall hand back to Joachim. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Emma, for that insightful section. It's always thought-provoking for me personally whenever we run through the cybersecurity or data access or data integrity risk itself. Because I work with a lot of people, and I know that sometimes thinking, oh dear, I can see areas of exposures immediately. And that leads us nicely to Patrick, who will be going a bit further. Patrick is the GM for Shield Consultant. They're based in Malta. They're a very, very good friend and partner. And all these, let me say that we're planned to scale up understanding skills for professionals, executives, this year, and I'm hoping that we can still do that somehow, even with all the lockdown and the thing we're having. So Patrick, I'm going to hand over to you to look at cyber risk during and after lockdown. What are the things we should watch out for? What are the big issues that, even thinking in African context, where infrastructure is not as great or not, and we have more exposure relatively as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Joachim. So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for having me with you for these couple of minutes. I will be going through some issues like Joaquin was saying about cybersecurity right now, not only during the COVID lockdown, but I mean, as that first point says over there, is we still are facing the same threats. It's just that the context is different. Unfortunately, there's a huge increase in the use of unprotected equipment, like Sarah was saying as well, using, like Emma was saying, like using equipment at home, like your home laptops, etc. The use of unsecure VPN software. And as you shall see, cyber criminals unfortunately adapt very quickly to the changing scenarios. Unlike most of us who, before we realize that things might be going wrong, cyber criminals are already there doing what they know best. And they capitalize on our anxieties and fears. Right now, people are anxious about COVID, about going out, about their relatives, about the elderly people, the vulnerable people. And they do capitalize on them by using misinformation campaigns. And they do it through phishing and ransomware attacks, like we shall see very soon. Next slide, please. What I will go through here, I will try and stay away from technical terms. I will try to keep this as straightforward as possible. But yeah, maybe next time, thanks to Joaquin, we can have another more technical session as well. So, most important thing is, do we know exactly what we are trying to protect, or who we are trying to protect? Because most of the time with cybersecurity is, installing the antivirus software or setting up a firewall or, I don't know, training people. But really and truly, do we know our main aim? What is the aim? Like Emma was saying, we have to protect our data. And, sometimes we hear about IT security, information security, cyber security, data security. I mean, they're all different names for the same objective, finally, protecting the information. With cybersecurity, we know that we are dealing with the internet as our main threat vector. But again, what are we trying to protect? We have information everywhere. We might say, okay, we are trying to protect information, but what information? We have our personal information, our financial information, company information. What type of information are we trying to do? So that's why we see the importance of carrying out proper risk assessments, even in information security, like setting up, do we know sort of the list of type of information we have at the office, in our business, at home, etc. So unfortunately, we notice a lot of information, a lack of information housekeeping, like people having information running everywhere. At an office, you have someone holding client information of clients that don't really exist anymore, or probably clients that were passed on to him by a colleague. So there's the importance of proper information housekeeping as well. And the final point there is CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Emma has already covered a bit of them. Just for a quick review of them, confidentiality is making sure that only people who are allowed and who need to see certain information have access to the information, no one else. Integrity, making sure that we have proper access controls, that if someone is not authorized to modify information, they don't have access to modify the information, making sure that if I am reading the information, I know that it is as it was intended to be originally. And availability, making sure that our systems have enough resilience in place so that our information is always available. Which brings us to the slide. So what are the current threat vectors? Who is trying to attack us? How are they doing it and why? Let's start with COVID-19. Right now, as you might have noticed, there's a big deal of fake news, what we call disinformation, running around. and misinformation. By the way, quick note just to clarify. When we say disinformation, is completely fake information, whereas misinformation is somehow starts from a good information, proper information, but then ends up being a mix of everything. Sorry, the screen went a bit. Can you modify the screen again, please, Joachim? No worries. Yeah. Phishing. As most of you might know, phishing is utilizing social engineering techniques. So trying to lure someone, making them think that who's talking to you is someone else. And ransomware. Ransomware is basically, just a quick run through the slides. There we are. Okay, thank you. So, phishing is like receiving a message like you have on the screen there on the left, an SMS suggesting to be from the UK government, saying that the UK government has issued a payment, click the link to receive your money. Unfortunately, people still tend to fall for such techniques who would click the link. Website pretending to be from the UK government would ask them for information, they wouldn't put the information, and they are disclosing their own personal information to any cyber criminal out there. And so, similar to the SMS, there are websites going on. The cyber criminals are also creating, registering domain names, like, for example, coronainformation.com, COVID-19, allyouwanttoknow.com, and stuff like that. Unfortunately, some of the phishing is utilized not only to get information from people, but even to infect computers with ransomware. Ransomware is where basically if you get infected with this kind of virus, the information on your computer would be encrypted and you would be asked for money so that it will be decrypted again. Obviously, against ransomware, best solution would be to make sure that you have proper backups in place so that you can say, okay, you can leave my information encrypted, I will just restore my backup. But we'll see that later on. We are noticing as well a lot of attacks focusing on high value data. So credit card information, personal information to be used for identity theft, etc. Unfortunately as well, there are a lot of people who have a lot of time on their hands, with people staying at home, like students not going to school, people unfortunately who are out of a job because they have been made redundant. They end up becoming collaborators with cyber criminals, trying to see how to make a quick buck unlawfully, but at the same time they feel safe because they are at home behind the computer, so they feel they are away from the eyes of the law. And there are plenty as well distributed denial of service campaigns going on, which basically are infecting various computers around the world and utilizing them to attack one single website, for example, or a company network. And right now, with people working from home, internet bandwidth is critical, of course. So a denial of service attack would crumble the network availability, and your employees would not be able to connect to their company network. Next slide, please. So, some vulnerabilities there are. First of all, something that we constantly mention is user awareness. Making sure that your users, your employees are fully aware of the risks out there on cybersecurity, the cyber risks. Especially at this point in time, being at home, away from the office, away from the IT department, the support staff, etc. People will be at home facing the risk themselves. So receiving phishing emails like the email over there is a huge risk. So making sure that your users are aware of the different risks, how to notice, how to identify a phishing attack, how to identify if there is a virus on their computer, how to identify if their antivirus is not updating properly, which Wi-Fi's to connect to, how to use the software, the VPN software, etc. They are very, very important. User awareness is one of the most key things that one should consider first and foremost when setting up an IT security infrastructure. That email over there, in case you don't understand it, it's saying basically someone received an email asking, dear Madam, dear Sir, due to the current COVID infection in your area, the World Health Organization has prepared a document explaining how to take precautions against the infection. And please open the attached document so that you can see how to prevent coronavirus infection. So simple, straightforward emails, but right now, due to people's fears and anxiety, as we said, they tend to open any attachment that comes along related to the current type of coronavirus. Unfortunately, we noticed that a number of businesses were unprepared for a pandemic, even though in risk management, one of the key things to prepare for are in case of an epidemic or a pandemic, how would you work, etc. We noticed that businesses were not ready. They did not have the contingency plans in place. So obviously, when that happens, people then have to react quickly, haphazardly, and unfortunately, some of them end up going for the wrong solutions. No, can you go back, please? Another vulnerability is that there are a number of employees using their own home PCs to work. So instead of utilizing a company-provided laptop, they utilize their own home PCs. Could not be always an issue. However, there's always a risk. So are the companies giving employees the correct list of software that needs to be installed on their computer, what security settings have to be on, etc. The VPN solutions that were being utilized, most of them were selected in a rush. So people went for either a free version of a VPN software, which was installed in a rush as well. Lack of setting up properly the security of that VPN software. Also, bandwidth requirements were not taken into consideration. You cannot just say, okay, I have 100 employees, give them VPN connections, they will connect. Is your internet bandwidth big enough, large enough to withhold such a large number of users at the same time? And also there are technology-enabled solutions like security utilizing CCTV, people connecting to their CCTV from home as well. So that makes bandwidth even more less available. Next slide, please. So what shall we do about it? Again, people awareness is key. Let's teach them about phishing and social engineering, how to spot a phishing email. Make sure they know that they have to report any abuse. And we have to make sure that they know that they should be reporting incidents, when to report incidents as well. Let's carry out the necessary risk assessments and layers of protection analysis, making sure that we are prepared, making sure that we know what information we want to protect, which is the key information, most critical information for our company. Research different VPN solutions and configure them properly, making sure that all the security settings are in place. And also deploy secure solution with caution and doing the proper background research before installing them. Next slide, please. So post-lockdown, what shall we do? Unfortunately, people might tend to go back to business as usual, as if nothing has happened. However, we need to learn from our mistakes. When we go back, why not? People might say, okay, we like the remote working idea. Let's keep doing it. Okay, but you have to make sure that you have everything in place. You have to make sure that you have contingency plans in place, and that you are ready to work. And can you modify the slide, please, Joaquin, because it's not well visible. Thank you. One back, yeah. Make sure there are the proper policies in place for remote working, so that you can clearly define the rules of how people should work remotely, whether to use a public Wi-Fi or not, when they can use it, when they cannot, and making sure that VPN connection is properly set up. Never let down your guards. Make sure that you are always ready for any attack. If there is any attack, how to handle it, how to respond to it. And make sure that you integrate cybersecurity with your physical security. Sometimes we tend to see cyber and physical as two separate things. However, they are combined. Nowadays, physical security depends a lot on cyber for access control systems, CCTV systems, and even security guards utilizing online tools to carry out patrols, etc. And finally, my last slide. I thank you for your time. That's me playing my guitar. Just one thing I wanted to mention is that we mention a lot of doom and gloom sometimes when we talk about risk management, but it's more about making our lives better and enjoying our lives. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Patrick. As we said at the beginning, I'm looking for the time where we'll jam together on my drums and on your bass guitar. After COVID-19, we'll see what happens. Now, this is where we go to Q&A question, guys. If you have any question, please. The rule is you can type the question in, or if you just raise your hand in the participant area, then we can pick the question one at a time. So I will observe your hand. If you have your hands on, I'll see it. It's like a green button. If you go to participants, you just raise your hands. I'll be able to pick one or two questions before we go. Any question? Okay, go ahead, MD.
All right, yeah, thank you, Emma and Patrick. I had a question, and I think this is probably directed at you, Joachim.
Okay.
Something Patrick alluded to in terms of when you're working from home and trying to use unsecure networks. With regards to Nigeria, you know, everyone is using either data from the telcos or the general data providers we know. How does that work in an environment like this where perhaps most of the data providers we use are insecure? So how does that work just from a data protection point of view, especially in the Nigeria scenario?
Okay. I'll bring the Nigerian scenario, but I'll perhaps also ask Patrick to come into it. Patrick, the telcos are different service providers. And the question is where the users are not secure about the service provider's IT system or using them in different platforms at home, using all this thing, how would it affect the business?
So from a technical point of view, as long as a proper VPN solution is utilized, then in that case, you have a secure connection between the employee laptop and the company network. That's why I said it's very important to make sure that the VPN solution is configured properly, because you can have a normal VPN connection whereby you connect to the company network, but it's still unsecure. However, if you set it up properly, you can have a secure end-to-end encrypted connection So even if you are utilizing an unsecure connection, there's no way that people would be able to see the data that's going on between them. However, it's also about user awareness, making sure that they are always utilizing the company-provided computers, company-provided VPN software, and that they behave according to the company rules.
Okay. Matt, do you want to add to that? Emma.
Oh, hello. Yeah, to add to it, it's the risk that the organisation's got to assess. What is the likelihood of that VPN not being set up, and what is the potential risk to that information being stolen? They need to look at what kind of information is being passed. If it's a small amount of information and it's not too sensitive, then you might actually think that risk is fairly low. But if it's an awful lot of sensitive information and may include health information, then you might think differently. So it's about looking at, perhaps, as Patrick said, doing a risk assessment. How big is the risk to the organisation, and how big is the risk to the individual? Okay. So it's kind of a risk assessment.
Thank you. I think just to add to that, from a local point of view, what I've seen that is happening now is that, for example, some organizations are using Microsoft platform and they move all their system into that platform. So when you're going to log in to start work, everything you're going to do, even though you might be using your own machine, the moment you log into that platform, as long as there's internet, so they do their firewall from their office. So the moment you sign, you log in, everything you're going to do will be in that secure environment. So it's kind of shield you from everything else, because your internal security itself, the moment you enter that place, everything you're working. But when you leave that place, then that machine can be so affected. So most people are now resolving to using that. I know some companies, for example, even for this Zoom, they decide to go on Microsoft Teams, everything that's integrated to what they have. Some of them also limit the social media link into their mainstream system. But most importantly is to have that, the VPN, the gateway through which you log into your backend. The moment, if that is secure and the protocol is good and your IT guys will be able to do that, then you minimize the probability of entrance or attack into what's coming in. Is that okay? Hello, is that okay? Oh, I can't hear.
Hello?
Hello, yes, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yes, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Any other question? Because we are almost, yeah.
Hi, I'd just like to ask, is it possible that we can get a copy of the slides to share to all the participants to this webinar?
Yep, it's possible through PinUp. So if you're a member, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question? I can't see hands. Are we all okay? Just to say, I mean, this is a very, okay, iPhone, I don't know your name. That's why we asked everybody to put their name there. Somebody called iPhone there. So I can't recognize you, but you can ask your question. I don't know who you are. Please introduce yourself properly.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Bimbo from Stanbic IBTC Pension. So questions basically is about that. I've heard cases where when you are doing an API integration, which one is the most secured option, client to client API or using VPN in terms of IT security, which one is easily more, let's say, less compromised? I mean, that's just more like clarification in terms of the most secured way of doing API integration.
Okay, thank you. Patrick?
I don't want to, because we might end up going too technical. However,
Yes.
however, as I said before, it's not really the type of VPN you set up. Security is about the proper configuration of your chosen solution. Make sure you research the different options available, even check the ratings of each solution, see what the everyone is saying about them, and then decide properly. However, configuration is very important.
Thank you. And I think also, just to add to this, we, because of time constraint, this is just to give you a high level webinar and to add value to the members as a partnership with PenUp. I'm sure in the future, if you're able to give feedback to PenUp, all this section we can run in different series, more in-depth section where we look at even your risk assessment, your data assessment, your cyber assessments, and some strategies to be able to minimize all these threats and opportunities within this period as well. Let me see if I can pick one more question, and I think if I can.
There are two questions there, actually.
Okay. I can't see there. Okay. What do you make of the use of Zoom for business? I also, okay, so it depends on the, okay, I think Emma, Patrick, do you have view? Zoom, it's a product, it's a package. I think it depends on the country's preference and also the security system. A lot of people are using it, and depends on so there are a lot more. It's not just using Zoom, it's how it's used, and also the secure environment where you can use it. But Patrick, what do you think?
As happens with a lot of different software, once the type of software starts being used by a lot more people, then the hackers will focus on it and say, okay, that's where we can make some money, because a lot of people are using it. Zoom have just said that they will be issuing a new version of Zoom because they identified a number of vulnerabilities. So I cannot say Zoom is good or not good. However,
exactly.
As we said, it's about a lot of things, not just one thing.
Exactly. Also, I think I want to look at this quickly. I want to pick this question. So the trend is to move to buy your own device or bring your own device to work. So how do we ensure data is being protected on that? Now, this is a very, very, I must say, it's a very, very dangerous policy, because if we're asking people, and most of us will need to look at this again, if you say bring your own device to work and they're using their device to do a lot of business work, so you have to have trust in the people that are using it. Absolutely trust that one, they will not abuse it. But again, that's not guaranteed. If not even them, it can be somebody close to them. It can be somebody else sharing their system with them. So the safest thing is to have a corporate device, well encrypted, well protected, and also a gateway through which they can log in and work securely. That's my view. Emma, what do you think about that? People asking people to bring their own device to work and use it to work.
Yes, it is quite common here in the UK. People use their own personal devices. And yes, it is something that organisations need to have a policy or a procedure about, and certain standards for sort of security and updates on their own devices. And they also need to make a log of who is using one of their own devices. So it almost becomes part of the asset of the organisation. The organisation needs to know where their information is, and so that's why they need to know who's using these devices and what devices they're using.
Fantastic. I'm going to stop there for now. I'll take the other questions. I'll look at it on the Q&A. We normally do a summary of each of these sections with the recorded video. We'll put it on our YouTube or somewhere, and we'll send the summary of this session with all the Q&A and some of the answers and their action. I'm going to invite Susan. By the way, just to, before inviting Susan in, pensions and insurance sector is one of the sectors we've been celebrating the last 8 years of risk awards. Please, if you're doing fantastic, great risk work within your sector, please apply for the risk award. And the information is out there. We are looking for those who are doing great stuff to celebrate and say thank you, regardless of the type of risk you're managing as well. But get back to us on that. I'm going to ask Susan to round up.
Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to sign in. I can see that we have almost 70 people. There's a lot more than we thought we'd have. This obviously is a very topical issue in the times that we are in. I've been receiving some questions personally on my phone and as private chat. So this is something that apparently a lot of the operators are interested in. And we will look at possibly having a rerun or organizing other webinars, covering similar issues. Now, if on an individual basis, your organization wants to have maybe a one-on-one session or one-on-one training with the facilitators of this training, please let PENOP know, and we will set it up and see what we can do for you. So if you have any questions, if you have any ideas, and if you want to reach out, please let us know at PENOP, and we'll set it up with Conrad Clark and their other partner networks. Once again, thank you so
Thank
much for joining the webinar.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a fantastic afternoon. Please keep safe, be strong. We're in this together, and we believe that this too will come and go by God's grace. So thank you for joining. Please, can you join me to say thank you to all the speakers, Emma in the UK, Patrick in Malta, and PENOP for the opportunity to be able to partner and create value to your members. Want to say thank you. So I know we can't do a round of applause. Please join me to say thank you, please, to everyone.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Stay safe, everyone.
All right, stay safe. Thank you, Joachim, for everything. Huh?
Thank you.
Thank you.